in the framework of the Edges Seminar Series. We are very pleased to have Meltem Kıran Raw from Başkent University's Department of American Culture and Literature. She's our dear friend, and that's why we would like to start this year with her. Dr. Raw is a graduate of Hacettepe University, and she did her MA and PhD at Başkent University's English Literature Department. And then she became a lecturer and then an assistant professor at the Department of American Culture and Literature at Başkent University, and she's still teaching there. She teaches ethnic literature, women's writing, American fiction, and literary criticism. Her research and publications include 19th and 20th century American women's fiction and African American fiction. Today, she will be talking about an Emily Dickinson poem, right? Thank you again for accepting our invitation.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Can we start?
Yeah, let's start. Today, I'm going to talk about something which is very much in progress. This is work in progress. I learned about this trick at a conference abroad, actually, because all the sessions that I attended started with the speaker saying that they were dealing with a topic which was very much in progress. So the approach was tentative, which I guess is a good trick. So at the end of the sessions, you do not get difficult questions, right? So, at any rate, now my presentation is going to deal with a poem by Emily Dickinson, but it also has a Turkish hero whom I have not been able to, let's say, place in my title, which is very tentative anyway, Nature's Localisms. But he is one of the secret heroes of this paper. Are you familiar with Emily Dickinson? You studied some of her poems in your classes? A few of her poems. Would you like me to give you encyclopedic information, or would you get it from Wikipedia? She's a 19th century poet, as you know, and together with Walt Whitman, she is still regarded as the greatest poet of American literature. She was very influential, not in her lifetime. You should already know this because she was a very reclusive person. She did not like being published because she thought that this was a way of auctioning your soul, if you like. And although she wrote about over 1,700 poems in her lifetime, only 7 or 8 of them were published. This might also have been because a literary critic who was her friend actually did not really understand her poems. She sent the poems to him asking whether they were, asking his opinion, and he wrote back saying that some of the English needed to be corrected, right? Because he really didn't get to the gist of her poetry. She didn't care. She kept writing. She knew she was a genius, at any rate, although, for a very long time, well into the 1980s, people thought that she was just a mad spinster, if you like, right? Who always wore black and who lived in the attic, hardly coming downstairs to meet guests. But A.J. Rich has changed our opinion of her. A.J. Rich, you may have heard about her. She is also a very famous poet and a very important theoretician, if you like, from the feminist lesbian perspective. She, in an article, argued that Emily Dickinson was very well aware that she was a great poet, and therefore she apportioned her life accordingly. She did not, let's say, how should I say, she did not live on other people's demands. which is what we do usually, don't we? Especially we women. What do we do? You know, akşam annemler yemeğe gelecek, akşam teyzemler yemeğe gelecek. Şimdi haber aldım, hemen yemeğe hazırlayalım. Yarın işte bulaşıkların yıkanması lazım, öbür gün çamaşırların yıkanması lazım derken, as you know, time passes and you do not become a great poet. Right? So Emily Dickinson knew this very well and therefore economized on her time. Right? So this is Emily Dickinson, our poet.
Something happens to your presentation here.
We can't take
We
it.
are working on it. Yes.
By the way, are there the second hero of our my presentation today is actually Hikmet Birant, a Turkish biologist, right? Have you heard the name before? Hikmet Birant. Right. I heard the name about 3 or 4 years ago when I attended a course run by Kırsal Çevre Derneği in Ankara, a course in dendrology, a practical course in dendrology. When I first heard the term, I thought that it had to do something with dentistry. No, it didn't have to do with dentistry. It had to do with trees, right? So, Kırsal Çevre Derneği, are there any non-Turkish speakers here?
Yes.
Okay. Kırsal Çevre Derneği is an environmentalist association, if you like, which voluntarily runs these courses every year over 3 or 4 weeks, and then organizes field trips for the attendants to find out about trees, their species, their lives. Brilliant course. So I attended that one. Apparently, the science of looking at trees is called dendrology. So it's got nothing to do with my team, right? The professor there, Ahmet Bey, who is a wonderful person, during a conversation said that told me that I should read Hikmet Kıran. So I thought, who is this Hikmet Kıran, right? And later I learned that he was a very influential and important biologist, right? Who was born in Konya, Karaman, who studied in Istanbul, but who eventually made his career in Ankara, Ankara Üniversitesi, and who was the founder, if you like, of the herbarium in Ankara University. You may have heard about what a herbarium is, right? A herbarium is a place where original samples from plants are collected, so that when you are studying, collecting plants as a biologist, you go to the herbarium and then you compare and contrast your sample with the original sample to understand whether you're looking at the same species or family of plants, or whether you have found out something else, right? So he established the herbarium, but his maybe more important contribution to, let's say, our natural life, our understanding of natural life in Turkey, or the natural environment in Turkey, is his books. He wrote 2 popular books, which became very, very popular in his time. One of them, the earlier, was Anadolu Manzaraları, a copy of which I actually got from our library at Başkent University, because it is out of print. It has not been printed for a great many years. I don't know why, but let me see. Yeah, the 10th printing, it says, is 2014. Since then, for 15 years or so, this book is out of print. So it's a very valuable copy for me, actually. Hikmet Kıran wrote this in 1957, right? This is the book, the first book. The second book has been in print regularly for quite a few years now. from İş Bankası yayınları called Alıç Ağacıyla Sohbetler, right? Conversations with the hawthorn tree. It is a how should I say? It is a longer book, and it discusses on the flora and the geography of Turkish regions, right? You know, traditionally Turkey is divided into 7 regions, right? Central Anatolia here being one of them, right? And he talks about, how we have come to the place where we are now in terms of plants, especially in terms of forests or lack of, right? It is called Alıç Ağacıyla Sohbetler. Unfortunately, it too is now out of print. So I've written to İş Bankası yayınları demanding, please let me know when it comes, when it arrives. I have a copy of it, but I like making a gift of it to my friends because it's very cheap. I mean, 18 lira. 18 liraya neler yaptığımızı biliyorsunuz. Right. So he is the second hero, right? So let me start my presentation proper. Okay. Ever since I attended that course in dendrology at Ankara University, run by Kırsal Çevre Derneği, I have been looking at certain things that I used to read and understand in specific ways in a different way, right? So this talk will be about how one's reading of literature changes over time in proportion to one's experiences, in a sense. So basically I'm dealing with the interaction between human beings and their natural environment, but I'm dealing with this within a local rather than global context, right? So I will not concentrate on, I will concentrate on how weather conditions, for example, impact the inhabitants of a specific area rather than how climate change impacts seasonal weather patterns in that specific part of the world, right? Which is a very important and global issue, as you know very well. But I'm going to remain with the region, right? Because of Emily Dickinson and Meltem Kıran, of course. Now, the word impact, can suggest a number of directions of inquiry, and very tentatively, again, so that you will not take me to task for it. Okay, I have, made a list of 4 types of impact. Now, we can look at how the physical conditions of our environment tell on our bodies and physical health. This is very obvious, isn't it? So this has to do with survival, basically. Survival of the human species and all the species, right? We can also study how a particular natural environment elicits emotional or aesthetics responses from us, which has to do with affect, right? With an A, not with an E, so with our emotional responses. And we live this, we experience this, I assume, every day, right? Asking you, for example, when was the last time that you saw a little cat in the street and went, oh, çok şeker? A month ago, yesterday? This morning, right? So this is, how the natural environment impacts us, because we always give emotional responses to it. These emotional responses might be positive or negative, of course, but I will not be dealing with that aspect today in a very rigorous manner. So, the third one is, of course, we can analyze how the area we call home informs our social, cultural, or political allegiances. That's, let's say, the main heading would be here, identity, okay? So, who am I, for example? I am Meltem Kıran Raw, born and bred in Ankara, okay? An unreconstructed Ankaralı, who therefore gets into conflicts sometimes with my friends, especially from İzmir. Meltem Hoca and Özlem Hoca know that very well. But I'm not going to give up on Ankara. Okay, so, but we can also, as individuals, contemplate how the natural environment we call home defines us in terms not of social, political, national identity, but in terms of ourself, right? Or selves, or our individual self. Let's put it like that. Now, I am aware that I am yet not greatly able to spell this line of inquiry out, but this is what I am interested in. And this is what I discovered in myself, or I'm still discovering in myself, in Emily Dickinson and in Hikmet Birant. Right? So, therefore, I would like to begin with the title of this presentation. The main title is The Robins My Criterion for Tune, the first line of Emily Dickinson's, one of Emily Dickinson's 1700 poems, right? Could we, let's say, o nasıl yapacağım? Burada göremediğim için. Sunum ikinci şeyin slayda geçmek istiyorum da. The poem's first line is The Robins My Criterion for Tune. Characteristically, Emily Dickinson did not give any titles to her poems, right? So therefore, the poems are known by their first lines. Until we get the, let's say, image, let me read the poem aloud to you, asking you one thing. My reading may not be that good.
Okay.
Okay. But while listening to it or looking at it, okay. This is Emily Dickinson, by the way. Daguerreotype photograph of hers, maybe the only one. All right. And this is the poem, right? I will ask you, when looking at this poem or listening to it, to note down one word or one expression, right, that jumps out of the page at you, right? So we can develop our discussion beginning from that point. So the persona says, the robin's my criterion for tune, because I grow where robins do. But were I cuckoo born, I'd swear by him. The old familiar rules the loom. The buttercups my whim for bloom, because we're orchard sprung. But were I Britain born, I would daisies spurn, none but the nuts, October fit, because through dropping it, the seasons flit, I'm taught. Without the snow's tableau, winter were live to me, because I see New Englandly. The Queen discerns like me, provincial. Right? A little poem. So, what was the word or the expression that jumped at you? Was there any in the poem?
Mine was tune.
Tune.
Yes.
Of course, because Özkan Hoca is a poet.
Don't believe in her.
No, he's a poet and he insists on not, showing me his poetry.
Yours is?
Seasons split.
Seasons flit, okay? Any? Pardon, duymuyorum. cuckoo, okay, it's a bird, right? Mine was actually New Englandly. Yeah, because it is quite unusual, isn't it? Usually from a proper noun, you do not form an adverb. And this is what she does. She says, she sees New Englandly. This is a coined word. Okay? So if I wanted to translate this into Turkish, I wouldn't get an adverb, I suppose. I would say New Englandlıca görüyorum. Right? That might be a little difficult to translate. And if I'm not mistaken, our Professor Ayşegül Kurtunç, right, from whom I did not take any courses, but from whom I learned a lot, has a book of translation, has a book where she has translated quite a few of Emily Dickinson's poems. Rütbesi Yalın Ayak is the title of the book, where you get the English text and then her translation, and where, as a Turkish person, right, whose native tongue is Turkish, I feel that I began to understand Emily Dickinson better through reading her translations, right? This is an amazing phenomenon. So, you know, at any rate, I'm not going to analyze. Maybe it's me. Never mind. Okay. So, in that collection, I could not find this poem translated, but I looked too quickly. Okay, last night, so I was, I was panicking a little, as usual, as you panic before an exam. So I couldn't find it. So New Englandlıca, I don't know. When I first encountered this poem years ago, I was also teaching courses in the survey of American literature, right? And in order to connect the writers to one another through a historical, let's say, chronology, okay, I was concentrating on certain elements of the writers that we dealt with. One element had to do with how American writers from the very beginning wanted to establish an American identity and kept asking questions about that. This actually is evident even in the literature before the United States of America was founded, right? In the colonial times, right? You may have read this very famous article called "What is an American?" Right? Criterion, famous article. Americans and we, therefore, keep asking the same story still. Not much has changed, but the American identity keeps changing. Now, therefore, I was very much interested in the contrast she establishes between New England, which seems to be another word for the United States, okay, and Britain. Two countries, right? And of course, the United States started off as a series of as a group of colonies of Britain, right? So I read this as some kind of a celebration of the democratic American spirit, right? As opposed to the very settled and established hierarchical thinking and political system of England at the time, right? So she basically says, my second word that interested me was, of course, provincially. She basically says, both the Queen, who was Victoria at the time, I believe,
Yes.
Kraliçe Victoria, and I, an ordinary citizen of the world, right, perceive the world in the same way. That's what she's saying, okay? So we look at the world, we perceive it in the same way. That is to say, the Queen takes, let's say, daisies as her, let's say, point of departure when she wants to think about England, right? But I take buttercups because I live in New England. So therefore, Although you might be the empress of the whole world, almost the whole world, they thought like that in that time, as you know very well. Britain was at the time the empire on which the sun never set, right? So she was the queen, Victoria was the queen of these huge, huge realms, as you know very well. But she was an ordinary human being because she perceived provincially, right? Depending upon, her perception depended upon where she lived, where she was born, where she regarded as her home, right? Even today, I'm quite bemused to see the news that the Queen Elizabeth, okay, has gone on holiday, and when I think about it, I think of the Mediterranean, of course. No, but where does our Queen go? She goes up to Scotland, right, and stays in her castle called Holyrood or something, and then she begins to behave very much like a Scottish person. It is because she lives provincially, right? You would expect her, to be in the Caribbean one day and the Mediterranean the other day, right? In Papua New Guinea the next day, and Australia, Sydney. No, she goes to Scotland because it is her home. Right? Okay, so teaching this course, I associated what I read as, let's say, Emily Dickinson's, let's say, tongue-in-cheek and patriotic message with the message, the same message given by many authors before her. And I taught the, poem accordingly. Now, this is a part of an article by Benjamin Franklin, you know him, a very famous figure, okay? Entitled Information to Those Who Would Remove to America. It was written published in 1782, when the United States was barely 10 years old, 6-7 years old, right? And he is basically, again, establishing a comparison between the United States and other countries in Europe, right? And this is very much a political comparison. So he's saying, much less it is advisable for a person, if you want to come to the United States, he says, all right? You should not do these things, or you should not think like this. How? Much less is it advisable for a person to go thither to the United States who has no other quality to recommend him but his birth. That is to say, if the Queen wants to move to America and live there, right, she will not be very eligible because she has designed her identity, right, on her birth. She's a woman of noble birth, right? No, in the United States we don't want this. And we should be very familiar with this spirit living in the Republic of Turkey. In Europe, because we do not like sultans and stuff. In Europe, it has indeed its value. Yeah, if you're of birth, it has indeed its value, but it is a commodity that cannot be carried to a worse market, to that of America, where people do not inquire concerning a stranger, what is he? People don't ask that, what is he? But they ask, what does he do? What does he do? All right? If he has any useful art, in those days, usefulness was very important, of course, right? The United States was sparsely populated. You needed people who were going to work the land, build the roads and houses so that the nation could grow, right? If he has any useful art, he is welcome. And if he exercises it and behaves well, right? We do not want any nuisance.
Mischief.
We do not want guerrilla warfare or anything. He will be respected by all that know him, right? But a mere man of quality who on that account wants to live upon the public by some office or salary will be despised and disregarded. So, if you come to England as the Queen, and if you say, well, I am going to become, because of the political system, I can't be a queen, so why don't I become a judge, right, serving the government, and then get my salary and have all other people do my work and enjoy it, right? No way. That's what he basically says, because in those days, civil servants in public in the United States, civil servants, received very low salaries, okay? So they really performed their service to the country, right? Willingly and voluntarily, and they really worked for it. Today it might be valid as well. At any rate, so this was my reading. I connected, let's say, a writer from the 18th century to a poet from the 19th century, right? Through what I saw as was their celebration of the democratic spirit and political system of the United States. A valid reading, I suppose, if you're doing a survey course. But then I ran into this person, Meltem Kıran. And I started reading his Alıç Ağacı ile sohbetler. Alıç Ağacı, I looked it up actually, is in English called wild hawthorn, right? And it is a tree that is to be found in many places in Anatolia, right? But it is particularly associated with Ankara as well, right? It is a lone tree, right? Which you can see by especially the side of streams. Not that we have any streams left anymore, because they have all been covered, right, by roads and stuff. At any rate, so this man, a biologist, goes to one of the hills of Ankara in spring, finds a hawthorn tree, sits down by the tree, and starts having a conversation with the tree, saying, "Hi, how are you? How has the last winter been?" Right? So the tree begins to speak to him. Although I am an academician of like 30 years, I started reading him as if I were a child, right? And as if the tree really spoke. That is to say, I believed in the personification, right? So this showed me, and I read later, what I read later confirmed my opinion that Hikmet Kıran was not simply a scientist. He is a person with great literary talents, right? Although we are getting to know about him, until recently, we did not know about him. As you said, you had never heard about him, for example. Okay? It's time that he was heard about, and it's time that he was translated. Anyway, so much for propaganda. So, by the way, he's not related to me. Hani öyle düşünürseniz diye. Okay, so I started reading. And when I started reading him, this book, as well as Anadolu Manzaraları, Anatolian Scenes, I remembered Emily Dickinson's poem, and I thought, well, probably Emily Dickinson might be talking about something different than mere, national identity, okay? Because Hikmet Kıran did something very similar to what Emily Dickinson was doing in the first article of Anadolu Manzaraları, right? The very first article starts with this passage. My apologies for the English. I translated it, all right? The Turkish is, of course, much better. He starts like this. I once lived for 5 years in a city by the Rhine. It was overcast and rainy there. The sun would disappear for weeks, even for months on end. You know how depressing wet, gloomy weather can be. What is more, if you are used to the bright sunlight of the steppe, you feel the morbid effect of a humid, foggy climate in your very bone. So was it with me too. When church bells started chiming, the city would appear all the more gloomy to me. How well I remember those days now. I kept yearning for the sun, our sun, and promising myself that once I found it again, I would never allow it to wake up before me, is what he says, right? So, following my original line of reading, right, in terms of poets or writers celebrating their national identity, you have enough root for thought here, right? Why? He is a Turkish person talking about his experiences abroad, right? Probably where, in which country? By the Rhine?
In Germany.
Germany, because he did his PhD in Bonn, actually, in the city of Bonn, right? So, I was smiling to myself as I read these lines because I was very happy that he, like me, was first a Bozkır steppe person, okay? And secondly, a Turkish person, right? Who, when residing abroad, started yearning for his country, which is what I usually do, right? As soon as I return from abroad, I dive into the restaurant and I say, give me my mantı and kebab, and quickly, and not so butter, please, right? So this is just about the height of patriotism that I can get. Right? It tells you a lot about me than about these writers, of course. Okay. So I shouldn't call it patriotism, maybe I should call it chauvinism. What I'm experiencing, in effect, right? Okay, but thankfully, and of course, Hikmet Biran knew better than I did about identity. If you come to a second paragraph, right? In the following paragraph, before we read this, in the second paragraph of this article, he reminisces one of his field trips to Adana, Turkey, because he was a biologist. He traveled the width and breadth of Turkey several times over. And he says that he went to Adana, Çukurova, right, on one of these trips. Anyone from Adana here? Anyone familiar with Çukurova here? But you know the climate of Çukurova, right? What kind of a climate does it have? Or is it said to have? Many writers, Turkish writers, have been influenced by, Adana, especially Çukurova, in terms of its climate, its needs of agricultural production, right? What, is weather similar to the weather in Ankara here? How different is it?
It's very hot during the summer day.
Very hot during the summer. Ankara is hot, but Adana is said to be very, very hot and humid. Okay, so he is in Adana, and he experiences this. Although he's an experienced biologist on a field trip, okay, he experiences problems in Adana because it is very hot. It's the end of August, and he says, whenever I saw animals turning themselves into the Seyhan, the river, just to cool down a little, or dazed birds trying to breathe through open mouths or attempting flight only after wetting their feet and tummies, right? Or normally agile and timid lizards allowing me in exhausted and motionless caution to edge my way closer to them, I felt utterly despondent, right? So the way in which he associates himself, identifies himself with wildlife is one thing, right? But the fact that he falls ill within the borders of his own country is another thing. So he was not talking about German nationality or Turkish nationality. He was, and he's talking about something else. I fell ill, he says, simply. On the last day of August, I was sent to Ankara on convalescence leave. Right? He takes the train to Ankara, and as the morning comes, he notices a huge change. From the starry night, an entirely new world had been born, fresh in all its contours and colors. This was the world of alfalfa. I translated it as alfalfa, but I'm not sure. Yavşan. Right? This moon, star, and soon sun-laden morning, this fresh, crisp morning, this beautiful sun, this stepson, my son, he says. That is to say, Bozkır. Bozkır'ın güneşi. Bozkır'a kavuştuğu anda, as soon as he reaches the Bozkır, he feels at home, because he was born and raised in Karaman, Konya. How well I felt. He gets immediately healed. One should not waste this morning, but live it, I said to myself. Right? So, therefore, he is not talking about national identity. He is talking about self. He is talking about how the self responds to what the self knows to be one's whole. Okay? This has a technical term which has been being widely discussed in eco-criticism for quite a long time now, ever since the late 1970s. The term is bioregionalism. All right? But I did not choose the term bioregionalism for my title. Instead, I chose the term localism because as one writer, I'm beginning to summarize stuff, as one writer, bioregionalist writer, okay, says the suffix, right, ism.
Yes, suffix.
It suffix.
This is a suffix.
Okay. The suffix ism usually implies some kind of, how should I say? Dogma, some kind of propaganda, right? But this is not either Birand or Emily Dickinson are doing, right? They are just describing, responding to their environment, all right? And then describing themselves in terms of this environment. There is nothing patriotic or chauvinistic about it when you look at it from this perspective, right? Now I return to myself, and for the last time, I will release you very soon, okay? With a story. Now, I was taken in by their understanding of the bioregion, all right? And I thought for some time that I really followed in their footsteps, let's say, relinquishing my chauvinistic or patriotic outlook, whatever, culturally conditioned outlook, if you like, all right? Until a few weeks ago, when on Başkent campus, I ran into this little robin, right? The robin's my criterion for tune, as you know. I was very excited because I saw this little ball of fire, flying up from the ground to one of the trees nearby, and I happened to be walking towards the bus stop with my American colleague, Jeffrey Howlett, at the time. So I beckoned to Jeff and I said, "Look, Jeff, there's a robin up there, right? Let's see. This is the robin, right? This is an Adana robin. Adana robin, taken by Volkan Peck, right? So Jeff and I looked very carefully because this little bird was hiding behind the leaves, of course. But we identified it or cited it as a robin, okay? I was extremely happy, enchanted, of course, because the robin's Emily Dickinson's tune for Criterion for tune. And I said to Jeff, "See, Emily Dickinson's robin's here," right? So Jeff answered me. He said, "Lovely bird." But then he added something which made my, happy world come crashing down. American birds, American robins are larger though. That stopped me at my tracks, right? I thought, what are you talking about? A robin is a robin is a robin. As Gertrude Stein said famously, a rose is a rose is a rose. A robin is a robin is a robin. So I went home dejectedly, right? And started, looked up my bird book. I have a bird book. And this is the beautiful painting, actually done by an artist from Yorkshire in England, about which I know very little, except for the fact that my husband's family come from there, right? And that the robin in England is basically known as robin redbreast, if I'm not mistaken, and is regarded as the national bird in many contexts. So, the robin therefore connected my regional identity to that of my husband, which made me very happy. But then in comes Jeff and he says, no, American birds are larger. American robins are bigger.
Everything.
So I think to myself,
Everything's bigger.
Exactly. I thought to myself, well, everything is bigger. Obviously, the robins in America must have become obese because Americans are obese. You know, right? Such stereotypes. But I didn't say that to Jeff for fear of offending him. But when I went home, of course, I looked at my bird book. And I saw that, yes, there is an American robin, right? This is a painting, a work of art called Robin for President.
Robin for President.
And
Is it American because of the flag?
no. Or maybe yes, according to the painter. Okay? Indeed, these robins, known by the same name, belonged to two different families of birds, right? The first, here you see the American robin, okay? And there you see our European robin, right? The American robin is slightly bigger than the European robin, all right? The tune is quite different. If we have time, I would have played it, but I think I'm exceeding my limits, right? And basically, they are birds of different families, right? They are categorized differently, down to their tune. So the tune of the robin that I have been listening or trying to identify for so many years was actually quite different from the tune of the robin that Emily Dickinson was listening to, right? That created a lot of consternation in me for some reason, right? And I will leave it here, asking you the question. Could you please help me identify why I was so disturbed when I found out that there was an American robin, which was not my robin, but Emily Dickinson's robin. What's with me? Right? So if you like, we can finish here. If you can help me with a few comments, I would be very happy. But I really need your help. As I call it, this is work in progress. Okay. This is the, yeah. All right.
Yes. Thank you.
I want actually
Questions, comments?
Yeah, questions, comments.
I'm most curious about the tunes of the robins, and the American robin and
yeah.
the European.
Yeah, I have them.
To listen to?
I have them, and they are quite fascinating. They are quite different to each other. One source says that the tune of the American robin sounds quite like that of the blackbird, which is familiar to us in Turkey, kara tavuk deriz ama güzel bir kuş ve çok da güzel sesi var. Yani. But it is essentially quite different from that of the European robin. Now, the question is, does that really matter? Do you care? Or do you say, a bird is a bird is a bird?
Yeah.
Nature is nature is nature.
But probably you would like to see what you are, what you're used to seeing.
Mm-hmm.
That's, you know, your eyes want to see the robin you have been seeing.
Or your ears are
Or
used
your
to the
ears,
robin
exactly.
you have been hearing,
Yeah.
right? And from the very beginning, like Emily Dickinson and Özkan Hoca, you are attuned to that song,
Yeah.
right? Emily Dickinson very famously said once, the brain is wider than the sky, right? Yeah, when you come to think about it, the brain is wider than the sky. But even the mind's ear, right, tunes itself on what is familiar with it, right? And this familiarity comes from our, the places that we call home, right? It comes from our bioregion. And I'm not defending some kind of a nationalism here, because when you read more about bioregionism, you will know that people may claim not one, but two, but three places as their bioregions. Okay? For me, for example, after all of these years, the Bosco is my home, of course, but London has also started to slowly turn into my home for various personal reasons as well. So I have two homes. Americans, many Americans, bioregionalists say, declare that they have no home because they keep moving, right? And they analyze this in the context. All right. Now this is
connected to the internet. So.
Which one is it? The Turkish one? European.
This is the European.
nothing.
Okay.
I'm wondering which one will sound more familiar to you. This is one.
Okay.
And the other one. Good morning, Berkan Hocam. Seni tanıyor. You're very competent technologically, yeah.
Is this the other one?
The first one, because it is the European Raw. Right? So on that note,
Benny says the second one sounds better.
the second one sounds better because it sounds like a blackbird, which is our bird
The
as well.
first one
We
is
like
more
the first
cheerful
one.
than the second one.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you
By
very
the
much.
way, can we elaborate on this word tune a bit more? For
Yeah.
I can take it not only as a song, but tuning ourselves to it at the same
Yes,
time,
I
adjusting ourselves.
Yeah, Emily
So in this
Dickinson.
sense, this localism can be understood in a
Yeah,
deeper way.
yeah, because Emily Dickinson, of course, uses words as many good poets in many senses of the word, not in one dictionary sense. So I would definitely agree with you there.
Okay, any other questions? Comments? Thank you. We should give it and this is a small gift from our department. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you very much. Çok teşekkür ederim. I will sign my tentative work. Çok teşekkür ederim.